Let's talk about an area that often generates cases within our practice area of fiduciary litigation. And let me just ask generally, what is the effect of a divorce on an existing will or someone's current estate planning?
My understanding is that when there is a will in place and there's a divorce, if that will is not replaced during the case, then it treats the other spouse as if they have predeceased you. And I guess that ends up being reciprocal, so that you go on from there without the obligations to inherit in place because they're considered by law to have already been deceased. However, my recommendation for people when they come in is, first, do you have a written will? And that's a question the other side is asking as well. And then number two, do you want to go out and get that changed while this is pending? Because if something should happen to you tomorrow, do you want this person who you are no longer willing to be married to get all your stuff? And unfortunately, last year in 2015, I had a case that was a very sad. Person had not made changes to the will and did die during the case. And there was not only a problem with the person that was getting divorced, who was not going to be getting half, but was going to be getting all. But during a period of infirmity, that spouse was the person named on medical directives and powers of attorney. And in fact, we had to consult with one of your partners, Adam Gaslowitz, about what to do for that person.
So I'm wondering, JoAnne, whether your brain book also includes a request to the client for estate planning documents, powers of attorney, healthcare powers, and things like that, so that financial consequences of a divorce, if the unfortunate happens, are also at least known and can be thought of.
Well, thank you, Robert. You bring up some very good points, because there are many. Divorce is such a multi-layered process. There are so many things to think about, and the items you just mentioned frequently get overlooked. So the Brains book can play a role in that. We always say go out and buy a 3-ring binder with colored tabs and make a tab for every category. And certainly the healthcare directives, wills are things that should be addressed and can certainly go in there. One financial factor that people do overlook as well is the post-divorce budget. I have had people come into a coaching session after many, many years of an unhappy marriage. They've decided to bite the bullet and move forward. And unfortunately, many times people make that emotional decision, but they don't pay attention to the financial details, including where am I going to live? How much is that future rent going to cost? How am I going to pay my bills? I haven't been in the workforce for 10 years. So all these issues need to be addressed, and the post-divorce budget especially is critically important. That is the number, how much money am I going to need every month to live? That is the number that can inform so many decisions moving forward. How much should I be asking for in spousal support? How much am I going to need in child support to make this work? So the post-divorce budget cannot get too much attention, and unfortunately many people don't think in those terms.
And JoAnne, I think that is the most powerful advice that you could give to anybody. I think the light bulb moment for my clients are when we take that post-divorce budget and we start applying settlement options to that post-divorce budget and apply financial planning techniques to it, whether we have to draw down assets to survive. And what we often see is the settlement offer that came across the table that was so offensive when we read through it is actually something that is feasible and we can live with it. And then the decision becomes, do we want to continue to fight? How much do we want to spend to fight to get an extra inch, an extra yard? Or, you know what, actually you may think you're being generous with the settlement offer, but from a cash flow perspective and an asset perspective, I cannot live. I'm going to be out of money in a couple of years, and so we need to continue to fight. So when you put all those tools together, you are able to make an informed decision. And I couldn't agree with you more about the post-divorce budget. I think that is the most important aspect of part of your preparation for the divorce process.
And surprisingly, frequently overlooked. Don't you find that, Mike?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
JoAnne, my question that's coming to mind here as you're talking about the post-divorce budget, one of my frustrations when I've got someone who's not working with a coach like you is folks will, and it can, sorry to be stereotypical, but sometimes it is a non-working spouse who has been the person running the home, forms an attachment to what I would call too much house for post-divorce life.
You are reading my mind. In the last several mediations we've been involved with, holding on to the marital home has become a huge issue. And that emotional desire to keep children in the same home that they've lived in so they don't have to change school districts, so they have the same friends, the same activities, becomes a very motivating force during divorce negotiations. However, that desire to hold on to the marital home can be very removed from the financial realities that exist in that divorce, and that is a very difficult leap. And many times the woman will say, well, I'll refinance. The ugly reality or truth to that is it's a lot easier said than done. You need certain requirements, certainly for income and assets, and a person who has not been in the workforce or is in a low-paying job is in a much more difficult situation than they can imagine. Flip side is the husband's name is on the mortgage and the wife's isn't. But the wife is the one who wants to stay in the home. How long is that husband going to be willing to keep their name on a mortgage on a home they're not living in? Perhaps they're going to keep their name on the title. It becomes very convoluted, but it's an issue that a lot of people have not thought through.
Where we look ahead in that is we try to come out of a divorce with as clean a division as we can, and I see Mike nodding his head too. We don't want people to continue to still be in business together. If they're going to continue co-owning a home, now they're going to have to start discussing every repair. Does a repair come along at a time and a point where it makes more sense to do an upgrade because it's a 20-year-old room in the house? And those financial decisions are probably the type of things that they were disagreeing with each other about on the way to getting divorced. And so we really try to come up with a settlement that within, if it's not 6 months, 12 months, gets both names off the house, and if it can't remain in the name of the one person who's looking to stay, then we need to look to Plan B.
Right, and I think what people need to understand is if the non-wage earning spouse wants to keep the house and refinance the house into her name, it's going to take 6 months of what we call seasoning of receiving child support and spousal support before they can begin to qualify to refinance. And you do not want strings attached as much as possible, you're right, because people move on with their lives, and it becomes more than just a financial decision. People start dating and maybe even get remarried, and when you're still tied to your ex-spouse, that's when it can get really ugly again.
Steve, you mentioned home inspection. A colleague of mine said, we always think of a home inspection as something we do when we're buying a house. It's also advisable for a spouse who wants to keep a house and may be getting the house in the settlement agreement to get a home inspection at that time, because you can turn around and you might need a new air conditioner, a new heating system, a new roof, or things that are more hidden than those. So a home inspection can be a very valuable piece of information at various times throughout the divorce process.